Well, it's nice to get back to this, my good old Madden 09 PSP series. As although the series ended almost a year ago, I'm still trying to do the videos wrapping up the series. I actually made this video last May, but unfortunately the audio files got deleted somehow, and I had to remake this now, unfortunately, back on January 4th of 2023. So hopefully this time around, with me not being busy, I can finally get this done and over with. So in this video, I wanted to talk about accidentally creating, in my experience, the greatest NFL Dynasty on any Madden game. And I've done a lot of Madden franchises over like 20 years of playing and all that, but this one is probably the best ever. And the fact that it was accidental too is insane. So now, time to talk about my Madden 09 PSP franchise series, where I talk about the Panthers, who went on a decade-long streak pretty much of being the most dominant franchise I've ever made. So of course, I gotta talk a little bit about the backstory going into this series. So of course, in 2007 real life, the Panthers went 7-9. It was their first losing season since 2004, missing the playoffs for the second time, and the momentum was not really on their side going into 2008, although in real life they did go 12-4, got a home first round bye before getting crushed by the Cardinals. But going into the season, I don't think there was much expectations for the team. So in the 2008 season of the franchise, they lost the first game to the Chargers, but then they went on to win 4 in a row, and thanks to the Buccaneers losing to the Broncos in Week 5, the Panthers led the AFC South. Already 5 weeks into the season, they were one of the best teams in terms of record in the NFC. But then, the next several weeks were a disaster. They lost to the Buccaneers, which cost them their division lead. Then they got obliterated by the Saints. It was like 41-14 as the offense completely imploded with turnovers. Then they won a game. Then they lost to the Raiders in a defensive struggle where they allowed Jamarcus Russell to score the game-winning rushing touchdown on the final play of the game. So after starting off 4-1, they fell to 5-4, but still right there in the middle of the playoff race in the NFC. Then they went on a 3-game win streak to get to 8-4, combined with the Buccaneers collapsing to 8-4 as well. They were both tied for the NFC South lead, and right then and there, the Panthers were easily in the track to still make the playoffs in a very crowded NFC bracket. But unfortunately for the Panthers, that would be the end of their success, as they were going to lose all 4 of their remaining games to finish 8-8 and out of the playoff race. While they didn't have a losing season, they missed out on the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row. So the stage was set going into 2009 for John Fox, their coach. If they didn't make the playoffs in 2009, he was going to be fired. So we then head into 2009. So in 2009, the Panthers once again didn't really have much expectations. But at the beginning of the year, they started off strong. They were 3-0. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think they were the last team that was undefeated. Unfortunately for them, they lost, I believe it was to the Redskins. They lost another game, I think it was to the Jets. Then they won another game to get the 4-2. And the AFC South was not good. The Saints, Drew Brees went down very early in the season, so they struggled pretty much the entire year. The Falcons were rebuilding, but they still had a little bit to go. And the Buccaneers, who went 10-6 last year, had a horrible start to the year. So for the majority of the season, the Panthers led the division. However, after a while, it became clearly obvious that the NFC South was going to be a horrible division, as just like with everyone else, the Panthers began to struggle. And going into the final week of the season, everyone in the NFC South was 7-8. The Panthers, though, despite the terrible season record-wise, they still had a chance to win the division. All they had to do was go to the Saints the final week and beat them. They had the tiebreakers at 8-8. Get it, win it, and you're in. So the game ended up being an incredible offensive showdown between the Saints and Panthers. And unfortunately for the Panthers, the game turned out to not be the way they needed. Near the end of the game, the Panthers, they scored a touchdown, but instead of going for the extra point, which would have I believe not tied it up, but got a 3-point lead, they decided to take a gamble and get the 2-point conversion because in that series, going downfield like in 30 seconds to get a field goal was very easy. So they wanted to get the 2-point conversion, get a 4 or 5-point lead. That way it would make it even harder for the Saints to make the comeback. Unfortunately, though, they failed. So the Panthers only led now by 2 points instead of 3 or 4. So, of course, the Saints, they got the ball, and with I think it was 30 seconds left, they quickly marched downfield, got in the field goal range, and they kicked the field goal, and it was good. And the Saints were going to win by 1. With this loss, the Panthers finished 7-9, their first losing season since 2007, and once again missed the playoffs. With that horrible debacle at the end of the year, John Fox was fired. So then, going to 2010, the Panthers struggled pretty much all year after the 3-0 start, so there really was not much expectations, and they released Jake Delhomme too, so they had no quarterback, and the mood at the time was the Panthers were going to tank. They were going to tank, and they were going to get probably up there as the number 1 overall pick in the 2011 draft, like they did in real life, to get a franchise quarterback to begin to rebuild. But they decided, strangely, to go for a stopgap quarterback. Now, who was that? Trent Edwards, the Bills quarterback at the time. Now I gotta talk about the Bills a little bit. So, in the first 2 seasons of the franchise, 08 and 09, the Bills were the worst team in the league record-wise. In 2008, they went 4-12. They went through 3 or 4 quarterbacks and all that. That was insane. And Trent Edwards was not really that good. So in 2009, with the number 1 overall pick, they drafted Rob Carter, and he was supposed to be a starter. However, Trent Edwards did good enough that he actually kept the starting job. So during this 2009 season, Edwards was the starter, and he played good, but the Bills were also inconsistent. And Rob Carter, when he got the chance to start, he just didn't play good. So they kept going back to Trent Edwards. At one point, the Bills were 7-4 and looking like had a chance to still clinch a playoff spot. They would then go on to lose all 5 of their remaining games to finish 7-9. But hey, after going 4-12 in 2008, that was an improvement. But of course, after this season, the Bills decide we have to go with Rob Carter next season. Trent Edwards did good, but he's not the future. So the Panthers traded for him. He was going to be the stopgap in 2010, and in 2011, when they tank, they would get a very high draft pick to get the franchise quarterback. So yeah, that was the plan for the Panthers going into 2010. Only fate would have it, that would not end up happening. The Panthers did regress massively to 5-11. However, they played a lot better than their record indicated. In fact, Trent Edwards had a pretty good season as his first season with the Panthers. I think he even made the Pro Bowl. He was doing pretty good. So the expectation for the Panthers quickly changed from tanking to get the 1 overall pick to, oh shit, Trent Edwards could actually be the guy now. And little did everyone knew, the Panthers dynasty would begin next year. As in 2011, the Panthers stunned everyone by going 12-4, their first win season and first playoff appearance since 2005, winning the NFC South for the first time since 2003, and for the first time since 1996, got first round bye, with one of the best offenses in the league as Trent Edwards just balled out and he played very good. So in the playoffs, they would beat the Rams in the divisional round, and then they would host the Lions in the NFC Championship, a team that would eventually become one of the Panthers' biggest rivals throughout the rest of the series, and a name you'll be hearing very often. But the Panthers held on to Lions and beat them to make the Super Bowl for the first time since 2003, where they would face the Aaron Rodgers-led Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That would be a very competitive game, but in the end, the Panthers held on to win it 28-24, and the Panthers, for the first time in their 16-year history, have a championship. What a complete turnaround from 2 years before. But that would just be the beginning. In 2012, the Panthers finished a then franchise best 14-2 and they clinched home field advantage for the first time ever, as they had a dominant defense along with their incredible offense. And in the playoffs, after dispatching with the Saints in the divisional round, they would once again host the Lions in the NFC Championship. This game was not as close, as the Panthers won in a spanking, but the Panthers, for the first time since the 2003-2004 Patriots, became the first team to make back-to-back Super Bowls, where they would face the also equally dominant Ravens. However, just like with the NFC Championship game, the close Super Bowl was last year did not happen, as the Panthers spanked the Ravens 31-19 in a game that score did not indicate how close it was. It was a blowout, and the Panthers, for the first time since the 03-04 Patriots, won back-to-back Super Bowls. After just a few years, the Panthers already had the most Super Bowls in this franchise's history. In 2013, the Panthers were trying to get a three-peat. Unfortunately for them, they took a little bit of a step back, and unfortunately for them, that cost them the division, as they went 11-5 and had to settle for a wild card. In the wild card, though, they would have to face the Redskins, who also had a good season. It was a back-and-forth affair, but in the end, the Redskins held on to win it, dethroning the two-time champions to prevent the three-peat. So after that, in 2014, the Panthers rebounded as they went 13-3, and for the first time since 2012, clinched the division and home field advantage. It looked prime to make it back to the Super Bowl. They would beat the Bears in the divisional round, and for the third time, they would host the Lions in the NFC Championship. This time, however, the Lions would get their revenge as they beat the Panthers, preventing them from making it back to the Super Bowl. So after the disappointing finish in the NFC Championship, the Panthers in 2015 looked the best team ever in this short franchise's history. They started off 5-0 with the league's #1 offense and defense. Everything looked right, and then it wasn't, as Trent Edwards suffered a near season-ending injury that would knock him out until the final 4 weeks of the season. And without Trent Edwards, the team completely fell apart, as they would lose 5 straight games to fall to 5-7. When he came back, though, the team quickly rebounded to finish 9-7, but unfortunately, for the first time since 2010, the Panthers would have to miss the playoffs. And then 2016 showed what would have happened if he played the entire season, as the Panthers, for the first time since the 2007 Patriots, went undefeated with the league's #1 offense and defense, pretty much, I think. They were just unbelievably dominant. No one could stop them. In the divisional round, for the first time, they would host the Lions instead of in the NFC Championship. They would make short work of them, and then in the NFC Championship, they would host the 49ers, who they would beat. And the Panthers, for the first time since 2012, were in the Super Bowl, where they would have to face the Browns. The Browns, however, came up clutch in this game and made it very tough for the Panthers. And late into the fourth quarter, the Browns had a 14-3 lead, and it looked like the Browns might actually pull off the upset like the Patriots had to suffer 9 years earlier. But then, on a big third down play, the Panthers made a freak-like deflection catch, which saved the game for the Panthers to salvage it, and they would later on get the touchdown and two-point conversion to make it 14-11. After stopping the Browns, the Panthers ran the ball downfield and got themselves within field goal range to kick the game-winning field goal as the time expired to win it 17-14. The Panthers have won their first Super Bowl since 2012, and they became the first team since the 1972 Dolphins to finish undefeated. Unfortunately for the Panthers, in 2017, the team lost a lot of momentum after that 16-0 season, as they fell down to 11-5, which thankfully still was enough to clinch a division title, but they would have to sell as the 4th seed. After dispatching with the Panthers in the wildcard round, they would visit the 49ers, who they beat previous year. The 49ers, however, were the dominant team in the NFC this year, and they destroyed the Panthers as they would be dethroned. Then in 2018, the Panthers came back as they finished 13-3 and once again clinched home field advantage. After beating the Saints in the divisional round for the 4th time, the Lions would visit the Panthers in the NFC Championship, and the Panthers would get the revenge from 4 years earlier as they beat the Lions to make it back to the Super Bowl for the 4th time, where they would visit this time the Colts. The Colts, however, were no match for the Panthers, as the Panthers destroyed them with no effort whatsoever to clinch their 4th Super Bowl. Unbelievable, but it's still not over yet. In 2019, the Panthers once again finished 13-3 and clinched the home field advantage. In the divisional round, for the 6th time in the playoffs, they would host the Lions, and they would beat them once again. And then in the NFC Championship, they would host the Cardinals, who they would beat in a close one. So the Panthers, for the first time since the 2014-15 Lions, would make back-to-back Super Bowl appearances. Where, for the first time since 1992-1993, it would be a Super Bowl rematch, as they would once again play the Colts. And at first, the Panthers completely destroyed the Colts once again, leading by like 20 points at one point. Then all of a sudden, the Colts made a giant comeback near the end of the game to cut the score within 6. However, the Panthers recovered the last onside kick to still clinch the game. I think it was like 39-33 to win back-to-back Super Bowls for the first time since they did it back in 2011-2012. The Panthers have now won 5 titles in the span of 8 years. 2020, the Panthers continued their momentum into the new decade as they went 12-4. This time, though, they had to settle for the 2nd seed. In the divisional round, for like the 7th time now, they would host the Lions once again in the playoffs, and they would beat them. They would then visit the Giants, trying to make the three-peat in the NFC Championship, but the Giants crushed the Panthers to prevent another chance at a three-peat. And then, unfortunately, by then, that's when the Panthers' momentum started to go away, as in 2021, they lost a lot of steam as they went 11-5 and once again had to settle off beyond the wild card. So in the wild card, they would host the Packers, who they would beat, and then in the divisional round, for the 8th time, but for the first time ever in Detroit, they would have to visit the Lions, who were the dominant team now in the league. And the Panthers lost to the Lions, and that would be it pretty much for the Panthers dynasty. In 2022, Trent Edwards retired after the season as the Panthers struggled, and they finished 8-8, their first non-winning season since 2010, and they missed the playoffs for the first time since 2015. And then the next year, without him, the Panthers regressed to 5-11, their first losing season since 2010. And after that, the Panthers largely were irrelevant until near the end of the series in the 2030s, where they finally became a playoff team again, but they never made the Super Bowl once again in the franchise. And that, my friends, is the story of the greatest NFL dynasty I made in Madden franchise mode. The Panthers, from 2011 to 2021, 10 years, had a win season every single year. They made the playoffs every year but one. They made the Super Bowl 5 times, and they won all 5 of them. The most wins in that franchise, in the first ever Madden franchise I completed all 30 years. They won 5 of the 30 titles. And they went undefeated, of course, in 2016. And if it wasn't for the injury, they might have gone undefeated in 2015, possibly. This franchise was not supposed to have been. They were not supposed to be this dynasty in the 2010s. But they ended up being so. All from one trade for a quarterback that was supposed to be a stopgap, as Trent Edwards would eventually make the Hall of Fame after this incredible dynasty. So that's the story of the 2011 to 2021 Panthers, a dynasty that was accidentally made. And of course, it's been almost a year since I finished the franchise, but I'm still not done making videos on it, as I still got a few more left I want to hopefully finish up, and then I'm finally done with the series. And then also, I wanted to say this too, I'm actually thinking about doing something like this once again, but on Madden 22, I believe the most recent one I have from last year to 2021 season. I might actually do another franchise on that with the exact same setup, where I simulate all the games and then play the Super Bowl and film it and all that. So I hope you all enjoyed, and see you all next time with hopefully more Madden content in the future.